Victor Langley leaned back into his worn leather office chair, eyes clouded with fatigue as he scrolled through a seemingly endless stream of customer complaints. The blurry text on his laptop screen stabbed at his conscience, each line another tiny dagger to the pride he had nurtured over the last 5 years. His pet supply chain, once his greatest passion project, had grown to 7 locations, but now cracks were beginning to show. Subtle at first, but unmistakably spread. Customers were complaining about rude staff, filthy stores, and worst of all, animals being neglected. Jordan, his ever-reliable assistant, entered with concern etched into his face. "Sir, I really think we should send a district manager to check things out." But Victor shook his head, his voice rasping with weariness. "No, I need to see it for myself." It had been far too long since he had felt any genuine connection to the very business he had built from the ground up. Somewhere along the way he had grown distant, from the employees who once inspired him, from the customers who believed in his vision. He hadn't set foot in any of the stores in years. Now the people working for him likely wouldn't recognize him outside of a corporate slideshow. This wasn't just distance, it was disconnection. Worse, it was loss. So a plan began to form in his mind. Not just a visit, not just another meeting, but the truth, seen through unfiltered eyes. He would go undercover. No suits, no briefcase. Just an aging man with dyed brown hair, thin-rimmed glasses, and a simple jacket. No one would suspect a thing. And that was exactly what he needed. His first stop, the busiest store in the chain. As he pulled into the parking lot and took a deep breath, Victor couldn't have predicted the heartbreak awaiting him inside. The air smelled of pet food and cage bedding, a familiar scent, but something was off. The floor was grimy, dust collected across half-empty shelves, and the energy of the space felt stale, lifeless. It wasn't just disorder, it was neglect. At the hamster enclosure, a woman frowned, tapping anxiously on the glass. Victor approached gently. "Is something wrong?" She turned to him, exasperated. "I've been waiting here for over 10 minutes. The water bottle's completely empty." He looked down. A tiny hamster licked desperately at the dry spout. The image hit him like a blow to the chest. How could this be happening? In a store that bore his name. "I'll find someone," he said quickly, and turned toward the front counter. There, 2 employees stood chatting. One was a young man with messy blonde hair, leaning lazily against the register. The other, a young woman named Jessica, according to her name tag, was scrolling on her phone. Victor cleared his throat. "Excuse me, a customer needs help with the hamsters. Their water bottle is empty." Jessica didn't even look up. "Yeah, we'll get to it," she muttered flatly, her tone thick with boredom. Victor frowned. "It's been dry for a while. That's not safe." The blonde kid scoffed. "If she's so worried, maybe she should just buy a new bottle." The words sliced deep. Victor's hand clenched around Max's collar, his knuckles turning white. He wanted to say something, wanted to drop the facade right there, but he couldn't, not yet. Finally, Jessica looked up with an annoyed glance. "You don't work here, old man. Maybe mind your business." Just then, another employee, a young woman with a ponytail, rushed over. "I'll handle it," she said quickly, shooting Victor an apologetic look before hurrying to the hamster cage. Victor exhaled. The rage simmering beneath his calm exterior wasn't just about what had happened. It was about what it meant. He kept walking, browsing the aisles in silence. He picked out a few dog treats and a new collar for Max, his loyal Labrador at home. But inside, a fire had been lit. Not a fire of fury, but of pain. The kind of pain that twists deep in your gut when something you once believed in begins to crumble. He had built this company on kindness and accountability, and now he was watching that vision unravel in real time. At the register, Victor was about to pay when something made him stop cold. Quiet laughter drifted from behind the counter. Jessica and the blonde employee were chatting, assuming no one was listening. "Can you believe that guy?" Jessica scoffed, acting like he owns the place. The blonde kid snorted. "If he cares so much about animals, maybe he should start his own pet store. Bet he'd suck just like our joke of a CEO." Jessica laughed louder. "Victor Langley? Please. Guy probably sits in his fancy office counting money while we do all the work." Victor didn't move. On the outside, he remained composed, but inside something cracked. He had expected problems, sure, but not this. Not outright contempt from people he had entrusted with his vision, his brand, his values. These were the very people who were supposed to carry the torch he had lit, and now they were stomping on it behind his back. His grip tightened, but he said nothing. He paused, stepped outside, but didn't go to his car. Instead, he circled around the building to the back, found a shadowed corner near the employee entrance. Leaning against the wall, he watched. He waited. He listened. Was this an isolated case? Or had rot spread deeper than he feared? A few minutes later, Jessica and the blonde employee stepped outside, laughing as they lit cigarettes. "So, you planning on actually working today?" Jessica teased. The guy shrugged, exhaling a puff of smoke. "I handed off kennel duty to the new girl. She thinks it's her job anyway." Jessica burst out laughing. "Careful, if she catches on, she might start reporting you." Victor clenched his jaw. There was no doubt now. This laziness wasn't accidental. It was a mindset, a toxic culture bred from apathy and a total lack of accountability. These employees weren't just slacking, they were doing it intentionally. And worse, they had no fear of consequences. Just then, a car pulled up in front of the store. A middle-aged woman stepped out, holding a small dog wrapped in a blanket. Her face was pale with worry. Victor followed her inside, keeping a few paces behind. "Excuse me," she said as she reached the counter. "I need help. I bought flea medication here last week, and now my dog's skin is raw. He's been scratching non-stop. I don't know what to do." The cashier, a young man with dark hair, looked at her with sincere concern. "I'm really sorry to hear that. Do you still have the receipt?" She hesitated. I think I lost it." Jessica chimed in from a distance, her voice sharp and dismissive. "Then there's nothing we can do?" The woman's face fell. She looked down at her whimpering dog. Not because of the skin irritation, but because no one seemed to care. The cashier tried again. "If you paid with a credit card, I can check the transaction history." Jessica rolled her eyes and snapped. "Why bother? It's not our fault her dog couldn't handle the meds." And that was the last straw. Victor stepped forward, his voice tight and controlled. "That's enough." Jessica turned, scowling. "What's your problem?" Victor ignored her. He gently guided the woman to the pet care aisle, scanning the shelves before picking out a soothing skin treatment. "This should help with the itching, but if it doesn't improve, I highly recommend taking him to a vet." Tears welled up in the woman's eyes. "Thank you. I just needed someone to care." Victor gave a solemn nod, then turned back to the register, his gaze locked onto Jessica. "You turned her away without even trying to help." She crossed her arms, unapologetic. "Not my problem." Victor swallowed the rising anger, but he knew he couldn't stay silent any longer. It's about to be. And with that he walked away, his resolve crystallizing into action. The next morning, Victor visited another store, one known for strong sales but mixed customer reviews. Still in disguise, he immediately noticed a different tone. The store was bright, clean, and alive with focused activity. Employees were busy stocking shelves and helping customers. An older man with a manager's badge was kindly assisting an elderly woman in choosing dog food. Victor observed quietly. The atmosphere was undeniably more positive, but he knew not to be fooled by appearances alone. Picking up a bag of premium cat food, he approached a young woman standing near the register. "Excuse me," he said, "is this good for senior cats?" The red-hamed employee smiled. "Yes, that one has added joint and digestive support. Great for older cats." Victor nodded. Then, lowering his voice slightly, he asked, "Do you like working here?" She hesitated, glancing around. Then she whispered, "I do, when the main manager is working. But when the assistant manager is on shift," she leaned in a bit, "he plays favorites. If he doesn't like you, he'll make your shifts miserable. Some people just quit." Victor stood still, letting her words settle. The problem wasn't just behavior, it was leadership. One store was rotting from the bottom up. This one was cracking from the top down. He had seen enough. The following morning, Victor sat in his office, staring at a notebook filled with scribbled notes. His frustration hadn't faded. It had sharpened into something deeper: conviction. One store was a disaster, defined by neglect and blatant disrespect. The other had good people, trapped in a culture poisoned by favoritism and fear. There could be no more delay. "Jordan, come in," Victor said, his voice low and firm, like steel cutting through fog. Change wasn't just coming, it had arrived. Jordan entered the office, a folder in hand. Victor took it without looking away from his screen. "Schedule a meeting with all district managers," he ordered. "I want every store manager present, and pull reports on employee turnover, customer complaints, and internal write-ups from the past year." Jordan flipped through the folder, glancing up. "Something tells me you found what you were looking for." Victor leaned forward, his fingers interlaced. His voice was calm but carried weight. "I found more than I ever expected." By noon, the conference room was nearly full. District supervisors and store managers took their seats, some confident, others visibly uneasy. The air was thick with anticipation. Victor stood at the head of the table, scanning the room. "I've spent the last few days visiting our stores, not as your CO, but as a regular customer." The room stilled. "I saw things that were completely unacceptable." A nervous shuffle spread across the table. One district manager, middle-aged and cautious, spoke up. "If there were any issues, sir, I assure you we're addressing them." Victor cut in, cold and precise. "If they were being addressed, I wouldn't have walked into a store where animals were neglected, customers ignored, and employees insulted me to my face, without even knowing who I was." Silence swallowed the room. From one corner, a senior manager named Linda leaned forward. "I won't make excuses. We've had complaints, but firings require documentation. Some store managers just don't follow through." Victor turned toward her. "You're saying they knowingly overlook bad behavior?" Linda looked down and slowly nodded. "Yes. Some avoid confrontation. Others show favoritism." Victor took a deep breath, exhaling as if to release months of building tension. "That ends today." He pulled out a printed list. "Jessica and the employee who worked with her at Store 4 are terminated immediately. Their actions weren't just unprofessional, they were destructive." Several managers nodded, unsurprised. One district supervisor muttered, "Honestly, that was long overdue." Victor continued. "Store number 2, its assistant manager will be placed under investigation. I'll personally interview the staff there. If needed, I'll make a change." Another manager raised a hand. "What about the stores that are doing well, sir?" Victor nodded, his voice softening. "I've seen dedicated employees across the board. They deserve to be acknowledged." He paused, then spoke with firm clarity. "We're launching a leadership development program. From now on, anyone who wants to move up will have a clear, structured path. Favoritism ends today." A wave of murmured agreement rippled through the room. "And one more thing," Victor added, his voice gaining strength. "There will be unannounced inspections at every store. Any case of animal neglect will result in immediate disciplinary action." For the first time in the meeting, Victor saw real change flicker across the faces before him. Some looked relieved, others resolute, but none remained indifferent. This company was built on trust. "Trust from our customers, our employees, and from me," he said, his eyes blazing. "If we lose that trust, we lose everything." The meeting ended in a heavy silence, not the kind born of fear, but the kind that follows a passing storm. Terminations were processed, inspections scheduled, leadership training was officially set in motion, but Victor knew his work wasn't done yet. That afternoon he returned to Store 4. No disguise, no more pretending. He walked in with steady purpose, immediately sensing a shift in the atmosphere. Several employees stiffened. Jessica was gone, already escorted out. The blonde employee had been fired as well. Victor walked up to the young woman who had helped him on the first day, the one who had spoken up about the dry water bottle in the hamster cage. She looked nervous. "You did what others didn't dare to do," he said gently. "I saw it." Her eyes widened, disbelief flickering in her expression. "And that's why I'm promoting you." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Thank you. I just thought it was the right thing to do." Victor nodded. "Exactly. That's why you've earned my trust." He turned to the rest of the staff. "Things are changing. You can rise with us, or you can step aside." The message was crystal clear. Standing near the store entrance, Victor watched quietly. The staff now worked with a sense of urgency he hadn't seen before. The apathy was gone. In its place was the energy of awakening. Word of the terminations and the coming leadership changes had spread like wildfire. He caught sight of the newly promoted young woman speaking with a colleague near the pet care aisle. Her posture was upright, her expression confident. She wasn't just working, she was leading. A good sign. Then, a middle-aged man wearing a store manager badge approached. Someone Victor hadn't met during his first visit, but whose name appeared in the reports as one who had failed to address issues. "Mr. Langley," the man said slowly, "I appreciate you taking the time to visit. I truly take your concerns seriously." Victor didn't blink. "Then tell me, why did it take my personal involvement for action to finally be taken?" The manager lowered his head, as though carrying a weight on his shoulders. I wasn't aware of how bad it had gotten. I saw complaints, yes, but I didn't realize things had spiraled like this." Victor's gaze didn't waver. "It was your job to know." The man swallowed hard and admitted, "I let it slide. I was afraid of creating disruptions. But now I see silence only made it worse." Victor nodded. "I'm not here to punish, but I expect accountability. From now on, I want a new approach. Clear oversight, regular check-ins with staff, and immediate action when issues arise. Can you commit to that?" The manager straightened. "I can, and I will." Victor turned back toward the front register, where a new employee was fumbling with a return policy. Before the situation could escalate, the young woman he had just promoted stepped in, calmly guiding the process. Exactly what he wanted to see. As Victor walked the aisles, he overheard snippets of conversation. Employees discussing plans to clean small animal enclosures, others reorganizing shelves with focused intent. There was still tension in the air, but not from fear. It came from the realization that the rules had changed. A new era had begun. Standing in the break room, Victor surveyed the silent team in front of him. He spoke, not loudly, but with enough weight to stir something inside them. "I don't expect perfection, but I do expect effort. This job isn't just about selling products. It's about caring for the animals, creatures who can't speak for themselves, and honoring the trust that our customers place in us. A long silence followed. Then, from the back of the room, a quiet voice spoke. A young employee who had remained silent until now raised his hand. Some of us do care. We just felt like it never really mattered before. Victor met his eyes, voice softening. It matters now. One simple sentence. But in that moment, something shifted. The young man nodded, and for Victor, that was enough. He didn't need promises, just actions. From here on, it was up to them to show him they meant it. As he walked out of the store, Victor was no longer lost in doubt. He carried with him a new clarity, a blueprint for meaningful reform. Leadership training would become mandatory for all managers. Employee performance would be reviewed regularly, not only when problems exploded. And most importantly, Victor vowed never to allow himself to become disconnected again. This wasn't about fixing one store. It was a renewal of purpose across the entire company. Victor's next stop was Store 3, known for its top-tier performance and customer satisfaction. As he entered, he immediately felt the difference. Shelves were well-stocked, the floors gleamed, and employees moved with pace and focus. A cashier greeted him the moment he stepped in, smile warm, posture ready to assist. Victor nodded back, choosing to observe silently. Toward the back of the store, a young employee in uniform was assisting an elderly woman in choosing dog food. There was no rushing, no passive attitude. The young man carefully explained the differences in brands, pointing out which ones offered better ingredients for older dogs. The woman listened closely and eventually made her decision with confidence. Victor took note. This was the level of care he'd been seeking. He made his way to the small animal section, where a teenage employee was diligently refilling water bottles and checking bedding conditions. "How often are these enclosures checked?" Victor asked, voice even. "Every shift," the boy replied without hesitation. "Every shift," the boy answered without hesitation. "We have a checklist to make sure everything stays clean and stocked. If anything looks off, we report it immediately. If someone skips it, they get caught pretty quick." Victor nodded. "And if someone ignores the procedure?" The boy gave a slight, confident smile. "They don't last long here. Our manager is strict. If you don't pull your weight, you're dealt with fast." Exactly the kind of leadership Victor wanted to replicate. As he walked toward the office, he spotted a woman in her 40s reviewing paperwork. Her name tag read Cynthia, store manager. He recognized her name from past reports, always associated with stability and standout performance. She looked up as Victor approached. "Can I help you with something?" He removed his glasses. "I'm Victor Langley." Her eyes widened slightly, but there was no panic, only a quiet composure. She straightened. "Mr. Langley, I wasn't expecting you today." "I wanted to see firsthand what makes this store different," Victor said. "It's clear you're running a strong operation." She gestured toward the stack of papers. "It's all about setting expectations early. Employees know what's expected of them, and if someone falls short, we address it right away." Victor paused, thoughtful. "Why is that so difficult to achieve at other locations?" Cynthia crossed her arms, a knowing look in her eyes. "Because some people avoid conflict. They let things slide because they don't want to deal with hiring replacements or uncomfortable conversations. But if you don't handle small problems, they turn into big ones." Victor was quiet for a few seconds. "How do you keep your staff motivated?" "Recognition," Cynthia said firmly. "When someone does a great job, I make sure they know it. Everyone works harder when they feel appreciated." Victor nodded. He realized he'd spent so much time focusing on mistakes, he'd overlooked the power of encouragement. "Would you be willing to help with leadership training? We need more managers who understand what you do." Cynthia didn't hesitate. "If it helps improve the other stores, I'm in." Victor extended his hand. Her handshake was strong, unwavering, like a commitment made without needing another word. As he left the store, Victor carried something invaluable with him, a model worth replicating. The blueprint for success wasn't a mystery. It was already being lived out in his best-performing locations. The challenge now was to turn that into the standard across the board. Back at headquarters, Victor finalized a new plan. The leadership training program would include mentorship from top-tier managers. Store inspections would no longer be scheduled, they would be randomized and thorough. And most importantly, he would launch a direct communication channel between employees and corporate leadership, allowing concerns to be voiced without fear of retaliation from ineffective store managers. For far too long, the truth had been buried beneath polished reports and surface-level numbers. That era was over. That evening, he sent out the first wave of policy changes. Next came implementation. There was no room left for delay. No more excuses. Only one path remained: change or be replaced. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Moments of Quiet Truth, where we believe that the human spirit is never truly defeated, only waiting to rise.